When Australian signaller Gary Wilson emerged from a coma 3 months after his Black Hawk helicopter crashed in Afghanistan, his first thought was that he'd been captured. He was tied to a chair in a dark room. Around him people were speaking in words he couldn't understand. I thought, on my feet or feet first, I am going home, he recalls. So, I did my escape routine. Gary freed himself from the chair but found his limbs weren't working properly, and fell face first onto the floor. That's when he realized he hadn't been captured. He'd been taken home. It marked the start of a recovery journey that, 9 years later, Gary, his wife Renee and their 2 young children are still on. Together, Gary and Renee have made the decision to share with their children, as they grow, the stories of Gary's past, even the upsetting ones. Because it's part of our life, Renee says. She says the family is still learning to live with the challenges arising from the helicopter crash, but the experience has helped them appreciate what's important. And, particularly with the kids, to understand that sometimes things get in the way, but it doesn't stop where you want to go, she says. Learning to walk and talk again. In June 2010, Gary and Renee were engaged. Their wedding date wasn't far away. Renee had heard about an accident in Afghanistan, and when she received a call from a private number, she assumed it was her fiancé. I was expecting to hear Gary's voice at the end of the line telling me to relax, he's fine, she says. But when I did answer the phone, it wasn't his voice, it was his boss's voice informing me that they were at my house. At home, she learned that the Black Hawk helicopter Gary was traveling in had crashed in Kandahar, Afghanistan, killing 4 men and injuring 11. Gary was in a serious but stable condition in a German hospital. She headed there immediately. She found him with a multitude of physical injuries, but, she says, that was meaningless compared to the brain injury. Gary could remember nothing of the crash, and he had to learn to walk and talk again. He suffered bruising on his brain, affecting his personality, temper, memory and cognition. Gary also suffered a diffuse accidental injury, he explains, which is essentially shaken baby syndrome, and the injury resembles having a stroke. Today, that still impacts on his muscle control and his speech, which is slurred and slowed. Tell me about when Daddy was a soldier. Gary and Renee make a conscious effort to talk to their children about the accident. Our eldest daughter knows that I was in the army and I was hurt, Gary says. Renee says their daughter is starting to ask more questions. She'll say, sometimes quite sporadically, "Tell me about when Daddy was a soldier or when Daddy was in hospital," she says. We are trying to be sensitive in the way we introduce it to our children, but it's natural for our 4-year-old now to get quite inquisitive and say, "Well, why are we here and why are we doing this and why is this important?" It's just trying to really explain to her the basics at this point. Sticking to the basics doesn't mean sugarcoating. The family regularly visits the War Memorial and the Wall of Remembrance. I go and pass my respects to the boys' names on the wall, and my daughter always asks why I go to that spot on the wall, and I tell her that my name was almost on that wall, Gary says. He acknowledges it has an impact on his children. They kind of keep reliving the nightmare because my daughter worries that my name is going to be on that wall, that I might die soon. And I assure her that I'm not going to die. But both he and Renee believe sharing stories is an important part of learning from the past. We are both passionate about veteran services and support for families, and we try to do what we can to help tell these stories and to help provide that support that's required in that community while people are still in service and beyond, Renee says. We want people to learn from our experience and learn from what happened. It's about learning from pain so that we can grow, and we are quite passionate about that. It's really part of the fabric of who we are now and our lives. A path with a lot more meaning in early recovery. Gary had a powerful personality trait on his side that continues to serve him well today. I like proving people wrong, he says. Renee agrees. I think the most powerful thing was having the particular doctors and nurses express doubt in what he could do, she says. It inspired Gary to defy several statistical odds during his rehabilitation. I'll never accept where I am currently, he says. I know where I want to be and how fast I want to keep improving, so through my rehab and through educating the kids, it's always an ongoing process of learning and developing. I'm not going to accept anything to be stagnant. Renee says the family is still learning how this impacts our daily life, but she also says they are back on the path we were on prior to the accident. While it's a path that diverged from the one they were expecting when they became engaged, Renee says, ultimately, it's been changed for the better. It's a more passionate path and a path with a lot more meaning, she says. To be pretty much back where we wanted to be when we first got together and made our plans about our life together is pretty amazing.